And now we're recording. Okay, so for PCR primers, the rules for making a good primer, again, like there's lots of wiggle room, but just in general where you'd want to start is, so for PCR, primers between 18 and 25 nucleotides is generally good. You want them long enough so that there's enough complementary base pairing so that they can stick nicely to the template, but not so long that you're giving yourself more opportunities to have sequences that are complementary elsewhere, right? So if we think about in the genome, there's gazillions of base pairs, and the odds that a string of 4 or 5 nucleotides are similar in lots of genes is very high. So if you made a really small primer, like 10 base pairs, it would likely sit where you want it to, but also in lots of other places. So if you want PCR primers to sit on a sequence, they generally need to be 100% complementary. Now, if you don't want it to sit somewhere, it can be like 80% complementary, and it's going to sit all over in places you don't want. So, you know, that's like Murphy's Law. So we want to give ourselves a big enough primer, you know, series of nucleotides so that the odds of it sitting elsewhere is pretty low. So we want to be, and 18 is about the smallest you can get to sit down nicely without sitting everywhere. 25 is about the max that doesn't cause you extra problems. Now that's not to say you can't get a little smaller and a little bigger. If you had to choose, you'd probably go a little bit bigger in order to meet the other parameters, but that's, you know, this is the average for PCR. Now, other applications, primers can be different sizes, but for generic PCR, like we're gonna do off of genomic DNA, this is about the size that we're gonna look for. The other thing is we want it to be between 40 and I'm gonna say 65 because it's gonna be hard to get under 60. GC rich, they call it. So that just means 40 to 65% of your nucleotides should be a G or a C. And why is that important? Well, if we remember way back to DNA, right? Anytime, if you have an A, right, he complementary base pairs to a T with 2 hydrogen bonds, but G's complementary base pair to C's with 3 hydrogen bonds. So it's just a stronger interaction. And so you want a strong interaction between your primer and the template, but not so strong that then it can't come off and back on during PCR. And if it's too low, if it's too AT rich, then it doesn't sit strong enough. And so it's a problem. So ideally, we aim for greater than 50%. Like 40% is kind of low. You kind of want more GCs than ATs, but you can make them work down to 40%.
I noticed in the example you gave too that there was more GC bonds than the AT.
Yeah, yeah. And so again, like I've made primers that were, you know, outside of all these parameters that end up working. It's just the odds of getting primers to work are best if you stay within the rules. So it doesn't mean like if your sequence absolutely cannot obey these rules, it's not worth trying it. And the same goes, you can obey all of the rules and sometimes PCR won't work. So we're just trying to push our odds in the direction of success if we can, right? So these are what we're going to try to do for ours. And then we want the 3' end of your nucleotide sequence to be a G or a C. So 3' end of primer. And that's so that 3' end, it has the tightest possible interaction. Because if we remember again from either one of my, I think one of those crazy tutorials or 360 or something we've read, that the polymerase adds to 3' ends only. So that would be the direction of where you're going to add the next nucleotides. So you want that guy stuck down tight to make sure the polymerase adds the correct nucleotide next and next and next and all the way down. Whereas the 5' end doesn't have to be so tight. And as it turns out, it can actually be not complementary and flappy around a little bit, which hopefully we'll get to a little later in the semester, working on that. For us, we want that end to be stuck also, but the 5' end could be an A or a T. Again, it's best if both ends are a G or a C. So we'll say, you know, 5' 2, hopefully. But that, again, if you have to not obey one of the rules, that would be one of them. So you'd be like, okay, you know, I could suck here and be lower than 50%. That's where I, you know, if I have to change a parameter, that one. And then I could, if I can't get, if that end just has too many A's and T's and it's going to get way too big or way too small in order to get to the next G or C, then we'll be like, okay, that's fine. But we absolutely pretty much, we got to have that 3' end be a G or a C. I can't even remember the rules. I think those are the big ones. And then, so these are for your individual primers. And then for, so we'll call, let's see, how would I, so when people refer to primers, they either call them like forward primers or reverse primers. And so for us, our reverse, okay, I was gonna have sequence in here, but I didn't load it, dang it. It'll probably take forever. So let's pretend that, here, these lines are like our sequence, right? And here's our 5' end of our sequence. Here's our 3' end. And this would be like where your ATG would be if we, you know, if these were all letters, and it would go, where's my thing here? Oh, there we go. Right, so this is the ATG, this would be 5' UTR, this would be, then you go into your white up to your 1,000 base pairs away or whatever. So if we were going to make a primer, we want this guy going this way, right? And we want the one down here going this way because we want them to amplify this stuff in here. And so they have to go towards each other in order to amplify. If we accidentally, which is not hard to do, as it turns out, if we accidentally went like this, then we're going to polymerize this way and this way off our sequence, which is not going to give us the middle. We're just going to get a bunch of single strands out here that are not going to amplify. And the same goes for if we did this and this, or this, you know, and that. So all of those are bad. So we're going to erase them. Erase. Oh, they're not going to let me erase the old ones. Go away. We don't want you. Oh, bastard. All right, let's try. There, watch this. Ha ha ha, you're going away. See? Okay, so we want our primers to face each other, right? And so that means this is the 3' end of this primer, 5' to 3', and this is the 3' end of that primer. Because we want to extend off of this, off of this end, all the way here, and then we want this one to extend all the way here. And so remember, what we have listed is single strand. It's really double stranded, right? So if we need to put in that other strand to help us design primers for PCR, by all means we can. And I'd have to ask Leslie because she's probably more familiar with one of the online programs where you can put in a sequence and then you just hit double strand, it'll give you the other strand. I used to have a, Yeah.
I'm here.
Okay. Because, you know, way back when in the dinosaur, when I rode my dinosaur to the lab, there was no internet. I know. Isn't that crazy? No internet when I started all of this. I'm old. I am old. So we had to have software programs to manipulate DNA. So of course, then I just kept using those programs because I was too lazy and I didn't want to learn anything new. So I know there's stuff online that would be useful for us, but I think Leslie and my lab kids would know more, you know, rather than using a Word document to store your sequence, there might be something better, because I always just use this stupid software and then I just click the button that said double strand and it would give you the double strand, and then single strand, it would show you the single strand. You know, you could do all kinds of stuff. So if we need that, I think Leslie can help us. Can you help us, Leslie?
Yes.
Okay. So so back to my stupid example, sorry. So right here, what we have is our sequence listed 5' to 3'. So obviously, if we think about the rules, this primer cannot be complementary to our sequence, right? Would that work? If this was the 5' end to 3' and this is the 5' end?
Has to be the other way.
Yeah, say no. Everybody
No.
shake their head, even though your camera's not on. Right? So anytime we do any kind of sequence, right, anything that's going to happen, right, remember that whole anti-parallel baloney? That's the only way you're ever going to get complementary base pairing to happen. So it either has to look like that. Oh, I already screwed it up. I'm giving you the example and then doing it wrong. Right, so that's that anti-parallel, right? 3' ends are on the opposite side. My elbows are the 5' ends, right? So if you have both strands there, then it's easier, especially when you're first starting, to see how you can make this primer needs to be complementary to the other strand that we don't see. Which, what does that mean? If this is complementary to this strand, the opposite one we can't see, then it's actually the same sequence as what you do see. Now, when we teach primer design, some instructors will just say, okay, your 5' sequence is just exactly what you see, and then your 3' or your reverse is just complementary. But then you have to memorize that, and it's not the understanding of why is this primer this exact sequence. Well, because it sits on the invisible strand that you don't have listed here. So it's still obeying all the rules of base pairing, right? Like if I drew in our imaginary, I need another color, hang on. Let's go brown, shall we? I think we shall. Okay, so if I drew in my other sequence for each one of these lines, right, our complementary sequence, then the brown guy, that would be the 3' end, and the brown guy over here is his 5' end. Okay, and then of course, these guys, you know, are complementary base paired together. And now this 5' end and this 3' end and this 3' end and, you know, all these ends over here would be the 5' end. Now this primer is complementary to this strand. Polymerase would grab this end and then complementary base pair off of that brown all the way over. Okay. And then this guy down here, 5' to 3' black, 3' to 5' black, complementary base pairs, adds to the 3' end, and then the polymerase goes in that direction. So the shortcut is just, we just use one strand, so we don't have to be complicated with two strands. And the 5' is just the sequence you see, or I guess I said I was going to call it something. Most people call this the forward. And then this guy is the reverse. I also call this the 5' primer because it starts on the 5' end. of whatever sequence, because we always look at just that one strand. And then I call this guy a 3' rather than forward and reverse, because sometimes there isn't a forward and reverse. You know, it just depends on how you're looking at it. So that's neither here nor there. So the forward guy is this sequence, which is complementary to that guy. And so it's going to add, whatever it adds is going to look exactly like the black line, complementary to the brown. This guy, when we design it, we need to make sure he's complementary to the black, not the same. If you make it the same sequence, it's going to bind on the brown and go the wrong way. And then you also have to make sure when you order it in the real world that you type it in correctly, because we always have to list all DNA when you order in the 5' to 3' direction. So that's another big place people can make mistakes. You designed your primers perfectly. It's just that this guy, if you read it from left to right, it's 3' to 5'. If that's what you type into the program when you're ordering, you're getting the wrong primer. And so then PCR doesn't work, and you try it a couple times. You know, you always give it like, okay, it was human error. And then you tried it twice, it's not working. You'll go back and make sure you ordered them correctly. And it's a lot of times it's that problem, it's the typing in wrong problem, or I made this one look like black and this one be complementary, or, you know. So that's why it's super easy to make primers doing this or this or that, versus we want them going towards each other. So we're gonna do, let's go one more, let's go to the next page. See, I was gonna load my sequence. I was unprepared today. I will while you guys get organized. So I'm just gonna do, I'll do my little fake stupid lines again really quick. I hope this isn't confusing, that my stupid lines, sometimes I feel like, remember this brown guy is 3'. Right, because it's really representing ATCG's blah, blah, blah sequence. And then this would, remember the black strand is the strand that we have. And so you either have your ATG, or that's where you bumped into your intron and your 5' UTR. Some of you didn't get to the ATG, right? You had your black line, and then you had, you know, intron, and then you had black line again like this. So either way, you want to be up here in this sequence up here, not past your intron, because your intron exists in the DNA and the transcription is going to happen in DNA. So you want it to definitely be not working down here by your ATG, because that could be 10,000 base pairs away from where your real promoter is lying. Okay, so we want to be up here before you wrote in intron and then to the ATG. And so, like I said, we want this primer to be as close to the ATG as possible, because we want as much of the 5' UTR as we can, because sometimes it's involved in transcription. And since like promoters are what cause transcription, that's gene regulation, that's what we're interested in, we want to grab the sequence as close to this as possible. But we don't want the ATG. So we don't want to use this G, right, as our last base of our primer. But so we hope there's some G's or C's pretty close to this, to the ATG right here. And so we want our primer, so we're going to pretend, I'm going to draw him right here, and we're going to pretend that's like 18 to 25 base pairs. And we want this to be the 5' end, and we want this to be the 3' end, because, right, again, polymerases only add to 3' ends, and we want it to be going this way, making this sequence up here, right? We want it to go all the way through that sequence. And so now it's a little bit bigger, so it's a little easier to see. And so this one is going to be complementary to the black line, which is the single sequence that you guys have in your Word document, which is essentially the same as the invisible strand we don't see, right? Because if these are complementary to each other, then this one is, and this one's complementary to black, then these two have to look alike. So this reverse primer will be complementary to your sequence, that single-stranded sequence you have. So that's how it has to be designed. So you essentially have to go, I'll pull it up in a second, but like just for, so we'll just pretend we get lucky and there's a G and a C and then A, T, and G, C. And so then our primer, we'd want this to be C complementary to G, we'd want a G, we'd want a T, we want an A, we want a C, we want a G. And we want this to be DNA. Oh, I need 4 colors. What's with the cheapo 3 color baloney here? We want our primer is DNA, right? Just because DNA is more stable. So we're not doing transcription, right? We're actually doing DNA replication, right? PCR is essentially DNA replication in a tube, and we're just replicating. We just want to replicate this small thing. We're not replicating an entire chromosome. And DNA replication, if we remember, just because I can't help myself, there are RNA primers to do DNA replication, but that's only because of physiological relevance and how it all works in there. We can use DNA sequence because polymerase is stupid. DNA polymerase doesn't know that this is the 3' end of a DNA G versus an RNA G. It doesn't know if it's ribose or deoxyribose. It doesn't give a shit. It sees this juicy 3' end and it will start polymerizing. Okay, so we make DNA primers even though physiologically replication is RNA primers. And then the same thing for up here, we're gonna pretend that, let's pretend like this end up here is a lot of A's and T's. And then we have a G and a C, A, T, G, C, A. Like that. And so we want to, so if, and look, I was smart. I didn't even know I was smart. And so if this was our entire primer, we have that last 3' nucleotide is a G. And that's our important rule from the slide before, right? We want to anchor that 3' with a G. Here we're anchoring our 5' with a C also, which is even better. And then if we look, because we only have 6 base pairs, it's more than 60% GC, but whatever. It's not all A's and T's. And, 6 base pairs. Okay, sorry, I digress. So then this one, right, we want it to be complementary, the forward, we want it to be complementary to the brown or the same as the top strand. And we want to anchor the 3' end with a G or C. So for this one, I think we'd want this guy to be our 3' anchor. And remember, we want the 3' on this side and the 5' of our primer over here because it needs to be complementary to brown and exactly the same polarity as the black. So if we were going to make that primer, this would be a G, T, A, C, G, T, A. Okay, because it's exactly like your sequence because we want it to sit, technically it's going to sit on the brown strand and then polymerase is going to go, oh, 3' end, I think I'll polymerize, right, and go in this direction. So if I pretend like it's all connected together and I draw my arrows, and I always draw arrows when we're drawing just because you got to keep remembering that's the direction. 3' end always goes in the 3' direction. So that again, we go like this, like we're doing, and not like this or this for that, right?
So the 5' end will start with the ATGs?
That's just random sequence.
Oh, okay. I thought you were emphasizing.
Yeah, sorry.
That.
So this could, this could be, let's make that something else. Let's make this AA. Right? ATGs can occur any place in DNA, right? They don't only occur in it's just, yeah, but let's make that go away so it's not confusing. Because this is up here is like 1,000 base pairs away, right? That's your top part, right? Your start of translation is really down here. Your 5' UTR, like this would be the blue stuff, and then this is all white. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so we want to make sure we have our 3' anchored with a G or a C. We want to make sure we're at least 50%, 40 to 65% GC rich. Want to make sure we're going towards each other. And we always be, okay, so that's, okay, that was my whole point. Sorry, I forgot my point. That this side, our 3' or our reverse primer, call it reverse, sorry. Our reverse primer is the guy that we really want to sit close down here. Like, so we want him within 50 base pairs of your ATG of or wherever you run into that intron. So we really want it, like in your sequence, that bottom line, because we want to make sure we get all of this 5' UTR stuff in our construct, right? If we're going to test to see if a promoter drives transcription, that's our whole point of this, then we want to make sure we have all the elements in that promoter that it might need to drive transcription. Like if, let's say these, and they probably will, the sequences down here are going to suck. It's going to be hard to find a good primer that meets our rules within 20 to 50 base pairs of that region. It just is. So this one we'll design first, and then we'll figure out all the calculations. We also need to look at melting temperatures. You want your reverse and your forward guy to have similar melting temperatures, which is essentially similar annealing temperatures, so that they'll work together when we put them in PCR. And since we are stuck with whatever crap we're handed right down here, we'll make this guy first. And so if he's kind of sucky, then we want to make a kind of sucky one up here to match, right? So if his whatever his melting temperature ends up being, we want this one's melting temperature to be that as well, even if it's not ideal. We want which essentially means you can get similar melting temperatures by GC richness. So you don't actually have to do the math for melting temperatures. If this guy ends up being 40% GC, then you'd want to make this one about 40%, even though that's the low end of reasonable. If this one's 40% and this one's 65%, they won't work together. They won't. They shouldn't, according to the rules, right? So that's why we have to design this one first. And as it turns out, now that it's not the dinosaur, it's not the Jurassic Park, there are programs where if we design this guy, we can put him in with your sequence and ask the computer to design its shitty match within reason. So we took, what did we take? We took about 1,000 base pairs or 1,200 or whatever, right? Upstream. We took a lot. You have a pretty big sequence. And remember I said most of the action, so most promoter action is within 500 base pairs. So we have a big region to make this crappy matching forward primer. So we should be able to find something that matches whatever craziness we end up with this guy someplace in here, because it's got so much room to make it. And we can, I'm going to show you guys a program too, to look at, for it to find something to match whatever we did. So really we're designing this guy, and then we're going to ask the computer to help us. Okay. We may have to futz with the parameters and lower the computer standards in order to find a match. And you know, in the dinosaur times, like I didn't have a computer to do it. It was just my eyeball. I'd just find one that was similar GC rich, make sure it had its 3' end, you know, sitting there, and then both need to be about the same size. So if this one needed to be 19 to avoid long stretches of similar sequence, we don't want a whole bunch of A's. We don't want a whole bunch of T's. We don't want a bunch of repeats like GC, 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 GC. You know, anything like that causes problems in primers. So those are the fine print rules. You know, and if you calculated stuff, like sometimes the primers totally sucked, but I got it to work. So we're just trying to give ourselves the most efficiency we can so that at every step in our process, we lose efficiency. That's just, you know, how science works. Like if there's 10 steps to get to your end product and you lose 10% at every step, you're down to 0% and it doesn't work. So you want to start as efficient as you can so then mistakes and crap can happen and it'll still work for you. So our first job is to have your sequence and to try to design a primer on this 3' end. Okay, so that's your job. While you guys are busy little bees, trying that, I will pull my sequence to have it here so then I can show you, you know, if you're still confused, you're like, I have no idea what that woman is talking about, then just hold tight because we'll be able to share screens and, you know, you guys can help each other. I'm happy to help you. You know, we can make it happen but then that gives me some time to get my sequence out. And I want you guys to try it on your own first, because if I just do it for you, then we don't learn anything. Like we learn by mistakes, which unfortunately there's lots of in science. So I have learned so much because, okay. So you guys have your sequence in whatever form. I guess if you would like double-stranded, wave your hand or say, Leslie, help me. And maybe I can let Leslie share her screen if she knows a program off the top of her head that will help them do that. Yeah. Otherwise, I mean, I think it's easier with one strand. It's less confusing to me just from experience, but I don't, you know, some people like double-stranded, some people like single-stranded to do it. It's always nice to have both, at least at some point, so you can check to make sure it's complementary, you know, just, and it's going the right way and all that. But we'll definitely do the checks before. Okay, let me stop sharing mine. Oops, I lost you guys. There you are. There's Leslie. Uh-oh, I have a chat. I missed the chat. Oh, yay, Snapgene. Oh, I could not think of the name of that stupid program. All right, thank you, Leslie. So in the chat is the Snapgene thing if you guys want to use that. If you're happy in Word right now, it's totally good too. Okay, let me here. And see if I can.
We want to do what you just did, but with our own gene.
Yeah.
On it and show
Yeah.
you.
So work on that reverse primer because we want to make that one first. And you're going to try to get as close to your ATG or to wherever, you know, if you had an intron in that 5' UTR, then up the sequence up to where that intron is.
So.
And I will find my sequence so that I can work too at the same time. So that when I'm putting it in that other program, like I'm not just talking out, you know, I can actually put sequence in there. But I don't have a primer made ahead of time to like Julia Child it, so.
I have a quick question.
Sure.
Are we turning in our forward and reverse on Canvas?
I don't have anything set up yet, but I will so that I can recheck them after if we, like, hopefully we'll be able to check primers all together so that, you know, you won't have to just turn them in and then me double check them. But yeah, we might have to if we, you know, if we run out of time. So we're not sitting on Zoom forever.
When we turn in our forward and reverse, do you want us to turn in the whole sequence as well?
Yeah, it'll be good because then I can have a copy of all, like, what everybody's sequences are.
Okay.
Also, I can't get in my stupid. I will. Yeah, I'll set up upload things. I'm scared to since we had uploading issues last time, but we'll try. I don't know why this is not letting me in. Oh, maybe. Yeah, and so right now you're just trying to make your 3' or the reverse primer. 3' primer. And yours might be easy and you go, woohoo, I'm done. And some people's might be way too GC rich. If it's all G's and C's, you know, right there, then that's a problem. If it's all A's and T's, then that's a problem. Okay. Ugh, how do I not have it in here? Crap. Where would that be? Aha.
So if there's an intron in between, do we start before the intron?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
How are we doing, guys?
Mine has 19 GC pairs out of the 25 nucleotides. Is that bad?
Ooh, that's a lot. Let's see. Let me use my calculator. It's like 76%. The problem would be finding one up, in a for your forward primer to match. Is there any other, can you shift it over a little bit to grab more A's and T's, or is it just super GC rich in that whole area?
So I'm looking right in front of the ATG.
Yeah.
And, I stopped before the green, so I'm looking in the between the green and the pink, the blue area. That's the.
Yeah.
I can shift it over a little bit. Yeah, would that be a good idea?
Yeah. Try. If yeah, because if you probably, yeah, you can probably get it down to below 70 if you shift it, like if you look at the screen I'm sharing now. I started just because randomly it just happened to be, oops, where's my, sorry. Right here just happens to be 2 C's, so I could anchor, even though that's the 5' end. I thought, well, just try it, right? Just do exactly right to that ATG. And then I just went out 21 nucleotides, because then I hit a little area that looked like it was going to be, some repeats and a little bit too much GC. And so out of my 21, I ended up to be, a nice 62%.
Okay.
So if and it wouldn't really help me to make this shorter, because I'd cut off one of each. Like if there was 3 C's or G's on this end, I could cut a couple off and get this a little bit lower to get under 60, but I'm like, that's pretty good already. But yeah, if you can't start right here, can you shift over 5 or 6, and does that give you, any more A's and T's up there?
How much do you want us to shift over? I mean, I could shift over like 8 to 9.
I mean, I would try. It just depends. Like I said, we don't know. So we're trying to get close to here, but we also need to get primers that are going to work. And it's trial and error, like you said. Like you can kind of eyeball it and look and say, wow, if I was looking up here, like this would suck. This would not be a good primer here. There's too many repeated AGG. We said that was bad. We don't want long strings of any one. We don't want 4 G's in a row. This would be like, if my primer was over here, that'd be terrible. It's 4 G's, 4 C's, another 3, Okay. But luckily right here looks pretty evenly spaced, A's and T's. There's not too much repeat, maybe a little repeat, GA, but whatever. And TC, that could screw me over in the real world, but it's worth a shot. So yeah, you can just kind of scoot it around and see what you get.
Okay.
Anybody else?
Mine is super GC rich also.
Okay. Is there anything that you can shift over, or is it all just?
There's very few, but it's very GC rich.
Okay. Because again, like we'll try, it just means we have to find a primer, that's going to match us in the forward, and we're going to try to let the computer help us. Hopefully, hopefully it'll be helpful. And again, if we can't make all those parameters, we just can't, because it wouldn't help you to say, well, there's a great, I don't know where this guy's 5' UTR, but let's make it up. Let's say its 5' UTR goes to is this whole region or something. To here. Like if I said, oh, there's a super great primer that I can make over, you know, right here and here, but then I'm missing all of this good stuff in my promoter construct. What if that's essential for driving transcription? It doesn't matter if I get a PCR product from, you know, woo, I got this great PCR product of all this stuff, and I clone it, but it doesn't actually contain essential sequences for the promoter to drive transcription. It's not going to drive transcription. So it doesn't matter that I got this wonderful PCR product. It totally screws my actual project. So we'd rather try to get closer down here, you know, within the 5' UTR, as close as we can to whatever sequence we have available, if it's your ATG or this is where that intron sits. Because later you might really need that sequence. Now the difference between starting at this base pair and this base pair probably doesn't matter. Starting over here, maybe not. Starting here, maybe not. I don't know. Like this is the +1 of transcription. And if we think about, if we remember, let me get a different color. Because I can't help but teach. I'm sorry. It's a problem. My daughter gets mad at me all the time because I can't ever have a conversation without teaching or something. If this is the +1, I'm making it up, I don't really know where it is, of transcription, that's where RNA polymerase adds its first nucleotide to make the RNA, right? And that's our point in the long run. That means our RNA polymerase friend, he's a big fat guy and he has a bunch of friends. They're all his catalytic end, his enzymatically appropriate end that does complementary base pairing has to sit right there, because this is where it's going to add, and then he's going to travel, right? The big guy's just traveling all the way down, right, into the coding region, making RNA. So that big blob enzyme with a bunch of friends has to sit right here. So if you make your primer up here and you only get this region, you're not going to drive transcription. Even if this is the other half of the promoter, you got half a promoter. But if you don't get the essential part, you're not going to get transcription. So we absolutely need to have this +1. And then because this guy has friends, some of his friends actually overlap this sequence to make this a nice stable interaction. So if you're missing right around here, but you got an awesome ass primer right here, like you're gonna get great PCR, but then the rest of your experiment's gonna suck. So if we only cared about PCR, right, that's the thing. Like if we were just doing PCR to see if this sequence is in the genome of something, we could make the primers anywhere. We just ask the computer to make the best primers possible. We just want to see any of this. Then our job's easy for PCR. But if we really want to have specific region, we have to get this stuff down here. We don't have to get this stuff up here, not all of it. So this guy can sit in lots of places, right? And if I go back a slide, right, here's my whole sequence that I pulled, right? And it's, you know, of course, this is my old cheesy dinosaur program. Right, it tells you right to here is 950 base pairs. So this is at least 1,000. So if my primer, right, I made my little primer right here. Oh, he's so cute. I could, now I get to ask the computer, and I want to say, probably I want at least, you know, this stuff, this sequence down here. So I could make, the computer could say, here's a good primer that matches, here's a good one, here's a good one, here's a good one, here's a good one here. I have hundreds, well, maybe not hundreds, but tons of spots for that forward. So we have options for the forward to match our reverse. It's just our reverse is going to kind of might not be so good. But we have lots of opportunities to make one similarly not so good, because we have that option up here. So it's not as bad as trying to find primers in an exact spot up here and an exact spot down there. That's really hard to make primers match.
How do you know what's a good spot to start the forward?
The forward, we're going to ask the computer.
Oh, okay, okay. I see.
We're just going to put in all of our sequence. So we're going to give him all of this. We're going to tell him what we made for reverse. And then we're going to say, go. Because otherwise we'd be eyeballing, okay, our reverse, mine was 62%. I need one that's 62%. I got to anchor with a G or a C. I need to have it be about 21 base pairs. So we could do it with our brain, but we're going to ask the computer to help us. If the computer won't find one because they're, you know, it's too shitty or we can't fix the parameters to make it happen, then we're going to have to eyeball it and we're just going to take a shot at it. And a lot of times when we do that, then we might make a couple primers up here so that when we do PCR, we, like, let's say this is our reverse primer and we'll say this is gonna be our forward 1 primer and this is our forward 2, and we order both of them. We would set up a reaction with forward 1 and our reverse. So that'd be in one tube. Here's my test tube. Here's the lid. Right, and then we'd have forward 2 in our reverse in another tube, and we don't care which one works. If they both work, well, whoop-de-doo, we're awesome. But if only this one gives us product, then that's what we use. Then we don't give a shit about that guy. So we just hedge our bets, because primers are cheap. They used to not be, but now they are. They're like $5. So, you know, if instead of like doing this one alone and it keeps giving you no results, then go back and order F2, and then maybe that one doesn't work, no results, then order an F3. We might as well just order them all at once. Instead of spending $10, we're going to spend $20, and then we can run these all in the machine at the same time, unless their parameters are super different. Then we just have 3 machines going at once. And then, you know, whoever works first wins. But we can do this all in one day rather than spending, you know, 3 weeks trying to get to that point. So if the computer doesn't find us one or gives us some options, we can always get multiple forwards. And in the real world, sometimes if the reverse is really bad and you can't decide between 2 bad primers, we order 2 reverses, and then it's F1R1, F1R2. F2R1, F2R2, F3R1, you know, we just make all the combos, throw them in the machine. And again, the gel, it doesn't matter if you run 2 lanes or 10 lanes. It's really not much more work or any more expense. So when we're deciding stuff with research, we decide by time and effort, like how much more effort is it to have more samples. And depending on the experiment, it might make a huge difference. A lot of times it makes no difference. And then expense. If the primers were each $100, we would buy 1 forward and 1 reverse. And you would beat the crap out of it to try to make it work under every single possible. There's lots of parameters you can change for the actual PCR reaction to get things to go also. So there'd be way more troubleshooting because we can't afford to have 5 setups. So research is driven by time and money. And at CSUN, we have more time than money. And we don't really have much time either. So we're kind of screwed. All right. Let me go back to this guy. All right. Is anybody else having issues? Or are you good? Making primers?
I think I found one more further down.
Okay, good. Yay. All right, I got to plug in my computer because Zoom is draining my battery. All right, and it's already noon, so let me show you guys the website. Oh my God, help me. Sorry, let me get plugged in. And then we can always do another Zoom tomorrow or sometime, well, Friday sucks for me. Sometime tomorrow or early next week to make sure, you know, if you're like, I can't make this happen, this sucks, then I can, you know, I can work, you can share your screen with me, I can work that. Or if you can stay past, you know, a little longer today. I just don't want, you know, I don't want anybody have to log out before I show you the other side at least. So let me stop that. And
like, let's say you skip over like 5 or 6 nucleotides from the ATG, what happens to those? You don't just count them?
they just don't, they're not in your construct. So like, oh shit, I just stopped sharing. Here, hang on. I'll share again really quick while I find that other thing. Yeah, see, that's the other, like, because it's not really lecture and I didn't really get to, like, I felt like I can't spend a whole class just lecturing about PCR. And I didn't even have time because my kid was in the hospital last week to like make a new just for you guys tutorial. I just found an old tutorial from you know, my other courses that it's like, okay, it talks about PCR. This should be close enough to what, you know, to get us started. Get away. Okay. So I'm going to go back to the other one. Oops. Go back here. Oh, crap. I have too much crap all over me. Hang on. Oh, boy. All right. How about this one? And we say.
I can share mine if you don't have one.
Okay. I was just going to, so that we, like, I would leave that other guy. So, all right. So, I'm just going to pretend regular PCR. I'm going to ignore the ATG and all that crap just to give you an idea of like how it really works. So that's another huge misconception about PCR. And I totally understand why students get confused, because a lot of textbooks and even my examples sometimes totally suck. And we're like perpetuating a misconception without even knowing it. Let me get blue back because that's a little easier. So we're going to say we're just doing regular old PCR. Doesn't matter. We're not trying to get near an ATG. We're just doing PCR. And so this is our sequence really is part of the genome, right? What we have, what I copied is just, right, we copied it out of a chromosome. You guys remember from the NCBI site, there was sequenced 10,000 base pairs, you know, 100,000 base pairs on either side of what we just copy and pasted. So this is just copy and paste. And so really, like there's base pairs, you know, all on this side. And like the chromosome doesn't end there at the ATG. That's just what we copy and pasted. So this is a huge piece of a chromosome. We're in the middle of a giant chromosome. So what happens is if we make a primer here, 5' to 3'. So he's going to go in the 3' direction. And then we make a primer here. This is 3', 5', right? And remember, this guy's actually, the forward's actually sitting on the other strand, right? So we have the other strand here in the real world of DNA. This guy's sitting on the strand we're looking at, so he's complementary to this strand. When we do PCR, when polymerase grabs 3' end, he's going to start complementary base pairing. So pretend these are nucleotides because I don't feel like drawing them all, right? So that was a G, right? And we're just making this strand, and it's still going that way. This is one solid piece. I guess maybe I need to draw better. And it's still going. It goes right on past there. It goes and goes and goes until it gets too tired and falls off. Because there's 10,000, 100,000, a billion more base pairs that polymerase can keep complementary base pairing in this direction. And that's the same to say for this one. It's going to start right here, but this piece is going to go this way And it's going to go past that primer. It doesn't give a shit. It doesn't know we put a primer there in the genome. What the hell? It doesn't have any idea. It's going to go in that other direction until it falls off. It might go 10,000 base pairs. It might have this. So the green strand going in that direction, this first strand of PCR might be 10,000 base pairs. This blue strand might be 10,000 base pairs in the other direction. So we haven't amplified when we do the first round of PCR. We're just making a single big, huge guy this way and a big, huge guy that way. The beauty of PCR happens in the next rounds when we hit it with heat, all the base pairs separate, right? So now we have single stranded, we have the original template guys, and then we have the new strand. So now our forward primer is going to sit like just where it did on the template, but it's also going to sit on that new green strand. And our 3' guy is going to sit just like it did before on that original template, but it's also going to sit on the blue guy. And so now this green guy can only go on the blue guy, right? He's going off the blue guy. Oh, the blue guy actually does end here, right? Because that's the end of the primer. So it does stop right there because there's nothing else there. And same with this primer that's priming off of the green strand is gonna follow that green. And the green ends right there because that's where the primer is. And then if the red sits on that short one and this short one, you'll get short, short, short. So it's kind of like if we were drawing, here's our double-stranded DNA, right? We're going to make them both. And our primer sits here. We'll pretend like this is our entire chromosome. Right? And this is forward, and this is reverse. Blue is the bottom guy. Right? The first one's just going to go complementary all that way. Doesn't give a shit about the primer. This guy goes till it falls off the chromosome. Now forward can sit on the blue and reverse can sit on the green and on the template. So it's still gonna randomly sit. This guy's gonna sit and go giant blue. This same guy's gonna sit and go giant green. But the guy that sits on the blue is only gonna go to the end of the blue. And the guy that sits on the green strand is only going to go to the end of the green. And now another primer is going to sit on that blue, and a primer is going to sit on that green. And then blue is only going to go to there through the primer, because that's still nucleotides. And then this guy is going to go here through the primer, and then we're going to get another round. And pretty soon, all we're making is this. Lots of DNA that's just this size. There's still going to be a few big ass, pieces, but the amplification, if we go 25 rounds, 25 cycles, we'll have a few of these, but every time we make a new one of these short guys, you have a ton of primers in there. There's not unlimited numbers of primers. So you'll make, it's like exponential. First you make 2, then you make 4, then you make 8, then you make 16, then you make 32, then you make 64, and then you blah, and on and on and on. And while you're amplifying this small piece from primer to primer, because if the polymerase gets to an end of it has to fall off. And then in your tube, you still have some of these, but you have gazillions of these little guys, little guys. And then if you put them on a gel, if you want to visualize them, right? If we're running a gel and this is big to small, that's large to short. You're going to mostly see the DNA when you stain it down here, right? And that would be all of these guys are going to come and look like that big fat guy. And then this stuff, it's still in there. There's still pieces that are the bigger ones in your tube, but we're not going to be able to visualize them on the gel just because there's not enough of it to see. It's there, we just don't see it. So what the gel actually looks like is just these guys exist. But we know the big long guys were in there from the beginning. We just don't see them on the gel. Okay, so polymerase doesn't know when to stop. It doesn't think, it doesn't know anything. It gets to where it can either poops out, like its enzymatic capacity is done, right? Can't get to the end of a chromosome if it's 100 billion base pairs long and just falls off, or it gets to the end of where there's sequence. So I think one of my tutorials has a better drawing than this in it, and if it isn't, I will go and find one. So that's how we just get the small in between, and that's why we want our primers facing each other 3' ends, because otherwise we'd have, here's our double-stranded DNA. If we accidentally made this primer, right, going this way, but we made our reverse primer going the wrong way, we're going to get blue to fall off. We're going to get green to fall off. This, you know, we're going to, the next round, more primers, but there's nothing for it new to sit on. It's still sitting on template. And you just get a long piece. And then this guy over here, right, we stick some more primers in. And we just make green. There's nothing to amplify, right? It might sit now here also, whoops, I'm wrong color. On that blue strand, but it's still going the wrong way. It's still going over here. We're never gonna make that little piece that we get amplified into the, you know, exponential amount of DNA. So if we looked at a gel, from big to small, large to short, it's running that way, we would see, if we did this tons and tons of cycles, because it never amplifies, we would just see like all different light, all these, you know, different sizes, some that are big, you know, this from here to wherever it falls off, but it's not going to fall off in the exact same place. So some are going to be ginormous, the whole chromosome, some fell off 10,000 base pairs before. And then this piece, because it started here, but there's no amplification in between here. So you're never going to get that piece that you want to then clone, because we need a lot of it to get to shove it into a vector. Does that make sense? Kinda? Okay, we're gonna pretend it does. We're gonna go with it, and we'll keep talking about it, and I'll try to make it better with real sequence and all of that stuff too. So let us, oh, there's that. Where is my, oh. Okay, so I'm gonna pull up the NCBI link to show you guys. I had it on here, I don't know where it went. Okay, I think I linked the sequence into Canvas. Let me share this screen. Where's my help? Where's my Zoom? There you are. Okay. So this is the primer blast. So it's another NCBI program. And it asks for your sequence. So you can either put your accession number, which doesn't work for us because our promoters they don't have an accession number, right? Nobody knows that they're promoters. And you can't just put in that whole chromosome. I mean, I guess you could, but that'd be ridiculous. FASTA sequence is a way to download from the website that actually has links to where it came from, and it's all formatted correctly. But again, we don't have a sequence in NCBI called our promoter. Like, we just copy and paste it. So what we want to do is essentially just copy and paste from our sequence. So this was the sequence that I was working with, the human VPB promoter. And I put it in that Courier font just because then it makes them all the same size, right? Helvetica G's are bigger than T's, and so this way they actually line up. Here's my ATG down here. And so I'm just going to take this whole sequence, and hopefully I don't have any returns in it. We'll find out. The program will kick it out if it doesn't like it. I'm going to copy it, and I'm going to paste it in here. We're going to see if it likes it or hates it. And then I'm going to go back to the sequence I just made up. I designed, I didn't make it up. Right? I made it up. Whoa. Where's the... Oh, here he is. Okay. And so use my own forward primer. No, right? That's that top one. We want to use our own reverse. So I am going to type in my own reverse, and it's telling me I need to type it in 5' to 3'. So again, here's where if I type it in as I wrote it on my iPad from left to right, it's going to be wrong. I have to start with my very 5' end, which for me, remember I had the 2 C's sitting next to my ATG, and so my first on the 5' end on the right side of my primer was a G. So I have to type in from right to left. So GG, TGC, A, GA, CAT. And so there's plenty of places for us to make mistakes here. So, if your primers like come back with nothing, just, recheck. Or it's also nice to have somebody actually read the sequence to you while you're typing stuff in, or have somebody else look at it, you read it to them. PCR product size. Now, this is the default. Well, I don't want it 70 base pairs. I want my product to be, I'll say minimally 400. That seems small, but we want to give ourselves some parameters. You can always make it higher. Maximum, we'll say 1,000. There's no way it's going to be bigger than that. Number of primers, I mean, I'm hoping for 1. It says 10. Melting temperature, so it's minimum here. It's saying 57. Since I calculated, well, mine should be. Let's leave their parameters, whatever. We'll leave it what they're saying. If we were doing regular PCR and we wanted to make sure it crossed an intron, so we know the difference between RNA and DNA, we would do something here, but we're not. We're all in genomic DNA. We don't need to deal with that. Specificity check. Yes, check to make sure it sits on what we put in. Organism, human. So we got to make sure we have the right one. Entree, primer, stringency, primer, 2 more. 2. Okay, so this would be, it's not going to give you back a primer that is 100% complementary to some other gene sequence. So it has to have at least 2 mismatches, which is pretty small, but again, this is the default to try to get as many back. If you get more than 10 primers back, you can raise all your parameters, make it harder to make primers. But we don't want to make everything real strict and then get 0. I'd rather get a lot, because that seems yay, and then just narrow it down than get none change a little bit, get none, change a little bit, get none, and then maybe get one, right? I'd rather do that. Max target size, well, that doesn't really matter. Okay, there was one place where I thought maybe I missed. Oh, okay, so right, so this, the PCR product size helps us. So that just essentially means, right, we can't get anything closer to our reverse primer than 400 base pairs away. The other way you could do it would be to say, if we didn't want, if we just wanted to get close to the bottom and close to the top, which maybe I'll do this and record it later to show you guys, we could say we want our reverse primer from, I don't know how they pick, I guess it has to be a nucleotide. Like then we could pick like the last 50 base pairs. We want our reverse primer to be there. And then our forward primer can be from 1000 to 400. So we'd say 1000 to 400. This would be, I don't know how many I said, 950 to 1000. So then it's only giving you, a little part of your sequence down here to pick a reverse and a bigger part to pick a forward. Since we really, really want our reverse to be as close as we can, we're going to do it with pick a reverse, ask the program to find our forward, rather than trying to find within those two regions. But I'll try that later and record it for you guys. So let's hit go and see what the hell, let's put a new window and let's, yes, use a new graphic view. And let's see if, my sequence is in there without any returns or any craziness. Because if you have a line, it won't read it correctly. And if it can find anything that's useful. Submitted, okay. Well, I don't know how long it's supposed to take, actually.
Is this what you want us to submit online? I know you made a entry already for one.
I don't know. Oh, so the entry that I made was for the pretend one.
Oh, the practice one.
Yeah, from that little video. So I don't have any place for you guys to put your primers or anything yet, but I would like you to try them in this program. Try your reverse primer and see what happens. Okay. I was just trying mine first so that if, I can show you how to change parameters and change the numbers of primers we might get back. But the idea is for you guys to put it in here so that we get a forward and reverse primer or some options. And then I'll try to figure out, maybe I'll just do Google Docs because I'm scared of the uploading since it was uploading for everybody else. And then we can all see each other's too. I mean, because we're supposedly in the real world, we're working together. We're in the lab together, like doing this at, all on our laptops at the same time, helping each other. I'm helping you, your peers are helping you. So maybe if we Google Doc stuff, then we can see each other's primers. Okay, here's our graphical, hang on, let me make, I can't, you guys' heads are over this. I don't know what you guys see. So it gave me a bunch. So here's the 3', right? Should all be in the same place. That's the one I put in. And then it gave me 10 primers that are supposed to work, which is kind of shocking. And then here's their actual, so this is my guy, and this is the guy they made for me. GC, %GC, self-complementarity just means, will it bend over and complementary base pair on itself? So remember, well, if you don't remember, anytime a single strand of any kind of nucleotide is anywhere near something complementary, whether it's on itself or another strand, hydrogen bonding happens. And that's chemistry. Nothing, it's just that hydrogen bonding, electrostatic, partial positive, partial negative, blah, opposites attract business. So if your strand has a bunch of G's on this side and a bunch of C's on this end, he's gonna flip over on himself and try to self complementary. And that your two primers, when you throw them in the tube, if they happen to be too complementary, they'll bind on each other instead of the template, and you'll get what they call primer dimers, not on your template. So they're telling us all these things. The melting temperatures, these guys are pretty close. This is where it's actually sitting on the sequence. So, right, so apparently mine was, right, so 970, 971, and 972 would have been my ATG, because remember I started right next to it. So this is where my 3' primers, its 5' end is on this nucleotide, its 3' end is on this nucleotide. This guy's 5' end sits at that 446 to 465 in that list. And then it's giving us another option. Here's another forward primer with R reverse, and he sits up here. His melting temperature is a little closer, so this one would be better than this one. So if I had a choice, I would want to try this one over this one. This guy's about the same. Let's see, that one's a little lower, not as close. Ooh, there's closer right there. Right, so of these, just eyeballing it by melting temperature being similar, I would want to do these two as my option.
Because
So
that is the highest GC percentage, right?
yeah, and they're the closest to each other.
How do you know that?
So this melting temperature, they want these to be as close to each other as possible. And then we want, which essentially means our GC content is very similar. Whereas like this is 59 to 57, that's not a, these two primers are more similar in our rules than these two primers. And so the more similar they are, the more likely they'll work together. So if we change some of the parameters, we will eliminate some of these. Like we make it harder harder to make them match in like our original, I just use the defaults. If we made those like, we want the melting temperature to be no more than 2 degrees apart. I think it was set to 3. We'd eliminate anything that was more than 2 degrees apart. So we wouldn't have as many to look at. But the computer is saying all of these are good enough, they should work. Whether they do or not, we don't know. But if we're only going to order 1 or 2, we're going to order the ones that are the closest. So this is 61 and 64 essentially. 60, 59. This one's 61, that's good. 61. Oh, this one's lower, it's 60. Its GC is 52. We're not going to, that would not be one we'd want to try. Doesn't mean it wouldn't work. It doesn't mean this one will work. But again, trying to push ourselves toward the possibility of getting PCR to work. So if you guys do the same thing, you should see, you might be able to see what, you might hopefully get a bunch of primers. Maybe you won't get any and we'll have to make the parameters looser. You might say 4 degrees of melting temperature difference, a bigger range of difference in GC or something like that. And so I think,
by next week, because I have to go for
yeah. So just by next week, and then just email me if you want to Zoom or have any issues. I'll try to make some sites to upload like screenshots just so I can look at, like if you do this, take a screenshot of, your pairs. I'm sure you guys know that there's some way to download this info into a file, which of course I don't, right? I mean, there has to be. I don't know why there isn't just like download. Search summary. Oh, that's kind of nice. Like, shouldn't it just say view as PDF and, download? But anyways, we'll try to figure that out just so that so you don't have to repeat this in order to show me, right? We want to have something, either downloaded or screenshotted. And I'll make files so that we can keep them in Canvas too, so that I can open them from my end and check. We don't have to be together for me to check your stuff. So if you have to go, go. If you want to stay, stay. If you don't have to go, but you want to go, go. But I can hang out and help or look at some of your stuff now if you need me to. So I'm available, but don't feel pressured that you have to stay. You can do this. You can work on this at home and try, try making it happen. Okay, yeah. So if you had to go, it's totally fine. Because again, it just took way longer than it should. How do I make this stop?
Hello.
I'm like, how do I stop recording?